Here are some of the top setup tricks and hacks to make sure you get the most out of your motorcycle, your gear, and yourself. It's a great idea to order and stock things that you know you're going to use all the time. Things like levers and grips and maybe foot pegs and maybe even hand guards, and certainly things like oils and cleaners, contact cleaner, air filter oil. When you use something and it's the last one that you have, go ahead and just place another order for it, because it's so much better to just have it on stock. Or even tires. That way you always have what you need to complete next week's ride and you're always planning ahead. A clean bike is a happy bike. I love to wash my bikes after I'm done with the ride because it helps me to know if there's any loose bolts or if there's any other maintenance items I need to take care of. Foot pegs clear full of mud. Check that out. And I just kind of hate working on a dirty bike. Hey, now that I'm editing this, I wonder if I got any of this stuff out of order. So watch the entire video and then let me know down in the comments if you think anything is awry. Now that the bike is clean, I like to take the opportunity to just go around and torque bolts across the bike and make sure that everything is actually tight and there's nothing loose. There's nothing worse than losing a bolt out on the trail or the beginning of the next ride. So go around after you've cleaned the bike and just kind of put a wrench on some of those items that you know are gonna actually get loose. Having a clean air filter in the bike is one of the most important maintenance items, so I would say keep a spare filter for each one of the bikes that you have. You can also get some pre-oiled filters, or you can put them in Ziploc bags and oil them and then just put them in the bag so that it's always ready to go. The other thing is I like to batch clean air filters. So you'll notice there's like 4 or 5 dirty air filters in here. It hardly takes any time to clean these things once you get going, but it's a little bit messy. And then I have clean ones, and then I have some that are ready to go directly into the bike. Wash your helmet. Your helmet has removable cheek pieces for a reason, and these things can get so freaking nasty. So you should be able to pop these things out of your helmet. Let's pop these things out and hand wash this stuff. I just use a little soap and water and then dry it thoroughly and then stick it back in. It is so much better to have a clean helmet. I don't know why we're not doing it more often.
Hey, and they say it's not a workout on a dirt bike. I call BS.
Our riding boots can get pretty nasty because they get wet and we sweat a lot in here. One of the ways you can combat that, the smell, is by putting dryer sheets down in your boots. You'll notice I've got a dryer sheet here. Just make sure to obviously take that out before you ride. Another thing you can do is you can buy this stuff. This is a natural foot deodor spray. I get this stuff on Amazon. I'll try to put a link to this down in the description, but I'll just put a couple of spritzes in the boots there, and that keeps the boots from smelling like a Foot Locker. Broken levers are a common thing when we're riding dirt bikes. So 2 ways that you can combat that. You can move the lever inward. See how far that is away? This lever is away from the end of the bar. That way when the bike comes down and hits, it's actually just gonna hit the end of the bar and not the lever. And for added protection, you can put a little bit of Teflon tape right under this clutch perch and the brake perch. And that way it can move just enough. I haven't had a broken lever in so long because of those 2 things. It's awesome. If your bike has a drain plug on the side of the motor here, I call this the no drip oil change. You can lay the bike over and then take this out. Now I bought this tool from Tokyo Off-Road, and once I've got the drain plug out, I just screw this on and then I lift the bike up, and then I can just drain the oil right out of this thing. It doesn't catch anywhere, and then I will set the bike back over, take this out, put my drain plug back in, and then fill it back up with oil, and it is the cleanest thing ever. I love doing that. It's so critical to have the right amount of rider sag. That's how much the suspension sags on your bike with you on it, full of fuel with all your gear. These are a listing of the bikes that I've done recently with the sag settings. Now you can set sag. I got videos on how to do this. You can either buy like a sag scale like this, you can use a tape measure, or I prefer this Slacker digital scale tool by MoTool. I love this thing because then I can set sag by myself. Sometimes it's tricky to set it by yourself if you don't have a tool like that. But get the proper amount of sag. I like to go about 105 millimeters of standing, 105 millimeters of sag while I'm standing on the bike. Check your manual and check your specs to see where you should be, but you're gonna be between 100 to 110 millimeters of sag when you're on the bike. Suspension travel is pretty critical, and some bikes will actually have an indicator here on the forks to see, so you can see how much of that fork you're actually using. If you don't have that, you can just put a zip tie on here. It doesn't have to be super tight. You want it just kind of the right amount, and that way you can slide this up, and then as you go on that ride or you go to a track or whatever, this will get pushed down and you'll see how much of that travel you're using. You want, on a ride, you want to use most of that travel because if you're only getting ever down to here, the suspension is probably too stiff. Or if you're bottoming the thing out with ease, then you know it's not stiff enough and you'll probably need to go up a spring rate. Information is power, and just knowing how much of the suspension you're using is awesome, so you can put a zip tie on there if you don't have an indicator on there already. I recommend putting bar ends on your bike. That way when the bike tips over, because we do that all the time, it doesn't jam your throttle or just grime everything up or tear your grips apart. It just saves everything and makes things a lot nicer. One of my pet peeves is when grips are twisting, and usually if it's a traditional like glue-in style grip, even if I wire it, my grips end up twisting. So I like to install a lock-on grip. I love these things. They're easy to install, they're easy to remove. And I'm also buying these open-ended grips here so that it's really easy for me to put my bar ends on the bike. So that's just a really fun tip. I don't want to start an internet war with this one, but I don't put chain lube on my O-ring chains. If you have an O-ring chain, you don't actually need to lube it. I just clean the chain, and then at the end, I will use WD-40 to dispel the water off of it, and then I dry it with a leaf blower if I can. And that way I'm not like spitting grease and not getting grime and gunking everywhere. And I have used the chain for more than 100 hours on more than one occasion without ever putting any lube on it if it is an O-ring or an X-ring chain. So this is all I use, and it's mainly just to dispel the water off of it so it doesn't rust. Is your carbureted two-stroke not running quite how you want and you need to rejet it? Look at the needle first. The needle is where most of the bang for the buck comes, not just your main jets. People talk about rejetting the bike and they just do the main jet. That only really affects your bike from 3/4 throttle on up to full throttle. Let's change our needle, or just even adjust the needle clip position here on the top of the needle. That's gonna give you a ton of bang for the buck and make the bike run a lot better. If you got a KTM TPI bike or Husqvarna or GasGas, I started stocking these idle screws. And I've been installing these in the bikes basically right when I get them, because that allows me to then adjust my idle independent of the air bypass screw, and that just helps the bike to run a lot better, and I can just tune it way better. The TPI bikes, there is some tuning required, and this is step number one to install that in the throttle body. I'll probably roll in some images here, and I got videos on how to do that, but that's a really great tip. Despite what the internet says, there is some tuning required on these KTM TPI bikes, and so once I have the bike with the the idle screw, and I've tuned my air bypass screw on the throttle body, I will sometimes then need to adjust my power valve right here. You can do that with one of these tools. When I have this cover on here, I have to use a longer bit to get in here. But I will just adjust that to the power characteristic that I want. Again, some tuning is required, and now this bike runs absolutely incredible. Tires. Let's replace and upgrade our tires, and don't use them too long. Both of these bikes have different tires on the front and rear, and I have different tires on both bikes because I like to try different things. But one thing I will say is I'm usually not a fan of the stock tires on the bike, so I try to burn through those as quick as I can, and then I'll probably install tubeless on them. But I've got a bunch of tires up here because there is no better bang for the buck than putting new rubber on your bike. It will help you more than putting a pipe or anything else you could do. Put a new tire on your bike.